Some of you may know this, but Connecticut Council for the Social Studies is nearing its 60th year of incorporation. We are the leading professional organization for social studies in our state, and we are seen as a leader across the nation. As an all-volunteer organization, it is the grit and determination of the board members and the dedication of our members at large that have served us so well. I came to the board of directors in 2015. CCSS was riding high after advocating to reinstate the social studies consultant at the State Department of Education, crafting a position statement for the social studies education, and leading efforts to write the Connecticut elementary and secondary social studies frameworks. Up until that point, Connecticut had a set of standards languishing in draft form for almost 20 years. For sure, 2015 was a banner year for social studies in Connecticut. After 2015, we dedicated the next 5 years to rolling out the frameworks and promoting the value of inquiry in social studies instruction. As many of you know, we leverage our relationships and credibility to usher in a new era of social studies in our state. Quite honestly, we could not have done this without you, Connecticut's social studies leaders. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Suddenly, meetings were all virtual, social gatherings were limited, and a renewed awakening of social consciousness ensued. Quickly, the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies had to reposition itself to best serve its stakeholders. In the process, we recommitted ourselves to our equity-focused mission, began to evaluate our practices, and focused on proactive approaches to elevate social studies in our state and beyond. At this time, we're pleased to announce that the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies is developing partnerships with state agencies and non-governmental organizations to reinvigorate and revitalize social studies for Connecticut's teachers and students. The plan for this transformation will unfold as the day progresses, but just know that each presenter today was chosen because their message speaks to the vision of this new initiative. In short, our organizations are combining forces to develop content standards that promote rigor, access, equity, civic mindedness, and inclusivity, a K-8 model curriculum as a cache of resources, and a menu of professional development opportunities to support implementation. This is why we called you together. Today's workshops are designed to provide a sneak peek at the theoretical underpinnings of our initiative and to provide the space for social studies leaders such as yourself to provide input on the process. Again, Steve Armstrong and I will provide more information as the day progresses. At this point, I'd like to introduce Sally Whipple of the Connecticut Democracy Center at the Old State House. She is the 2021 recipient of the Bruce Fraser Friend of the Social Studies Award, and we are honored that she has agreed to introduce our first presenter of the day. Sally?
Thank you, Tony. It's a real pleasure to be with everybody. Yesterday's conference was wonderful, and I think today's looks like it's going to be equally wonderful. I actually feel honored to be introducing Dr. Cathy Gorn from National History Day. You may or may not know Cathy, but whether or not you do, you should know that she has a gigantic impact on our state. Our organization, through our Connecticut History Day coordinator, Rebecca Tabor, runs History Day in Connecticut. And through that program, we reach thousands of students. And the program is incredibly conceived and beautifully carried out at the national level. And I thank the history gods every day that years ago, early in her career, Dr. Cathy Gorn made the decision to go to work for National History Day. She's worked there since 1982. She's been the executive director since 1995. And since that time, all of these years, she's been challenging herself and her team to build an organization, a program, a system, a structure that really and truly supports middle and high school educators as they support their students in the learning of history. And it's not just about learning history, it's learning about all of the skills that you need to know to do history, to understand historical context, but also to understand historical processes. And I love the way Cathy links National History Day and the work in History Day to the importance of civic education, because History Day, by helping kids understand context and helping kids understand how to analyze resources, how to analyze research, how to do research, how to present, all of those are the skills that good historians need, but they're also skills that good citizens need. And those skills that are passed on, through every state, coming from National History Day, are vitally important to everything that we're doing today in every aspect of our lives. I think that Cathy's work, National History Day's work, really provides ways for kids to enter into adult life, knowing how to function as good citizens and good adults who really have a firm grasp on the world. And we see that in the students we work with in Connecticut every day. Cathy holds a BA from Kent State University and a PhD in history from Case Western Reserve University. She serves on the White House Association Board of Trustees and the National Capital Radio and Television Museum Board. And I am sure she serves on about 1 million other things. I know that she's in demand speaking nationally and that we're very lucky to have her with us today. She is the creative, motivated, energetic, insightful, and visionary executive director of National History Day. And as I've said, we feel her presence in Connecticut every day. In my mind, History Day is the perfect tool for courageous teaching. It puts students in the driver's seat. We always say it has student choice. They get to choose what they research, and student voice. They get to express what they've learned and how they feel about what they've learned and how they've learned it. So it puts students in the driver's seat. It gives them the tools to reach their destinations and helps them uncover and explore new skills, ideas, and perspectives along their way. And I think those are incredibly valuable tools. And I feel that we're so lucky to have Cathy Gorn here today to talk to us about teaching courageously. Cathy?
Oh, thank you so much, Sally, for that really generous introduction, which I will try my best to try to live up to. I appreciate the kind words and appreciate the opportunity to be able to join you today and talk about my favorite subjects, which are, of course, history and history education and National History Day, and all the pieces, parts that go into all of that. I started to think about what to talk about this morning based on the information that I was given and what I saw in a run of show that you all put together. And I was given some big items for discussion that I could probably talk an hour on each of these. One was teaching history in challenging times, and also building an argument with evidence. So those are big pieces. And I'm going to try to do my best to talk a little bit about each, as well as a little bit about National History Day, and tell you a few stories that are some of my favorites from my 39 years with the program. But first, I assume that everyone knows what National History Day is. Do you think I assume that correctly? Or should I do a real quick down and dirty, what is History Day? Maybe just quickly, just in case if you are not completely aware of National History Day, I'll do this really quickly. So National History Day is a program that was modeled after Science Fair, which is an active way of doing science, and the founders of National History Day wanted to create an active approach to learning history. So getting kids away from textbooks and boring material and multiple choice tests and digging into the raw materials of history, getting into the archives and museums and doing oral history interviews and all the things that we as historians do to find the truth in the past. And then interpreting and analyzing all that information based on an annual theme, which triumph and tragedy in history, conflict and compromise in history, taking a stand in history, communication in history, it goes on. I sort of live my life by these themes. And then once they interpret the material, then they present their work in a paper, a tabletop exhibit, a dramatic performance, a documentary, or a website, and then are judged at a series of contest levels up to our big national event in June each year. So that's the down and dirty, what is National History Day? So now I'm gonna just kind of turn to a little bit more about what I've asked to talk about. I'm gonna share my screen here and make sure I'm able to do that effectively. I hope. Hold on here. There we go. I hope you can see this. Yes? Good? Okay.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Good. Anyone who knows me, and especially my staff, know that if I were to compete in National History Day, I could never do a documentary or website. The technology thing is definitely not my thing. So I'm always really super impressed by the kids and what they can develop by using technology in presenting their historical information. So teaching with courage. I'm going to start with that. And as I, kind of thought about this theme for the Leadership Summit today, what does that mean to teach with courage? In particular, teaching history with courage. And for me, as a historian, that means teaching historical truth, right? That's what we do as historians. We seek the truth, the truth from the past. And while that is kind of easier for academic historians in colleges and universities to do, who have a little bit more freedom to dig into the past and teach about the past and the truth of it. Not as easy if you're in middle or high school classroom, as we know, because in more recent times, especially in this last year or so, there has been quite an attack on historical truth and history education in general, as we've seen all across the country. Most recently, of course, is this Texas Senate Bill number 3, which has been in the news. Everything, bigger and more widely distributed. I guess Texas is so big, so it's in the news in a huge way right now. But it's important to remember that 27 other states are doing this. 27 state legislatures are working on or have already passed legislation that specifically tells teachers what they should or should not teach when it comes to social studies and history education. That's some scary stuff right now. And I know from talking to some teachers in the Big History Day curriculum that they're facing some huge challenges. And although we've got 27 different states doing this, and there's a lot of variety going on, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Texas bill because it has been so big and in the news more recently. The bill, to be fair, has retained in its new sort of standards the teaching of the Constitution and the writings of our founding fathers. It includes the 13th and 14th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So, to be fair, they've left that in from the previous standards. But what is most telling is what's left out from the last set of standards to this new version that they've just passed. And what's been removed from those standards is the history of Native Americans, Frederick Douglass's writings, the Fugitive Slave Acts, Thomas Jefferson's defense of the separation of church and state, women's suffrage, the Indian Removal Act, and more. And it's sort of a watering down or a whitewashing of history that's kind of taking place here. And to hear lawmakers explain themselves, there's an attempt to avoid making young people uncomfortable or generating discomfort among our students if we're teaching about some of these very dark issues and periods in our history. So I guess the reverse of that is that we're supposed to comfort students using opposing viewpoints that makes them feel a little bit better about some of these rather dark episodes in our history. And when you think about opposing viewpoints, that again is not what historians do, right? We develop arguments based on evidence. We don't consider opinion. We're looking at facts. So when it comes to issues, particularly like slavery or in world history, like the Holocaust, we look at multiple perspectives, not opinions about what people think about it. I've been to many, many teacher workshops and had teachers say to me, okay, so when you do all this History Day stuff, when did they give their opinion? I said, I don't really care what their opinion is. I want to know what their argument is and how they've formulated that argument based on really solid evidence. But what we're finding out there, not just in Texas, but in a lot of areas, a lot of school districts, it's a scary situation where some of this is being not only sort of dumbed down and whitewashed or removed, but also done in a way to kind of encourage a real blind patriotism among our students. So how do we help students make sense of these challenging times? If we can talk about the challenging times, right? Teaching history should not be an act of public relations. We can't pick and choose to examine, only the stories of history that make us feel safe or comfortable. So we really lose an opportunity when we do that, because one of the most important reasons why we teach history is to foster empathy among our students. And if everything was just a rosy picture, then we're missing a great opportunity, as well as the opportunity to bring in civics in that teaching history encourages young people to get involved in their communities, involved in their country in different ways. And it's critically important. But I think if you water down the past, then we're taking away students' freedom to understand and learn from the past. We hear all the talk lately about my freedom, my rights, right? You can't make me do this, you can't make me read that. Well, we're taking away the kids' freedom to dig deeply into history and try to understand the past from different and multiple perspectives. So in my mind, these lawmakers aren't giving kids credit. Kids don't want to be lied to. They're smarter, I think, than these lawmakers are giving them credit, and they gravitate toward social and racial justice kinds of issues and topics. They are interested in human and social and civic rights. At least the History Day kids are. And in fact, if you go to any History Day contest wherever you might be, you'll find that looking at the topics, more than 50% of the students there with their topics, the topics are about issues of justice, racial justice or social justice. They look at civil rights, they look at human rights, and they do so in a way that makes them want to make change. It makes them want to talk about what's fair, right? How many times a day do you hear a student say, that's not fair? Because they want fairness, they want justice. But that doesn't mean that they, that makes them anti-American. We're hearing a lot about this now too, that if we teach about some of these difficult areas of our nation's past, the darker areas, the racism and oppression and sexism and issues like lynching and such, that somehow we're teaching kids to hate America, right? Except that we're doing the exact opposite. That's what I believe. I think these guys have it so wrong, that the beauty of American history is the ways in which we have struggled to deal with these things. And I think kids are really in tune with that sort of thing. So I'll give you an example of some students who were looking at the topic Mississippi burning in 1964. So the episode in which 3 civil rights workers from Chicago went south to try to register African Americans to vote. And that was in the summer of 1964. It's known as Mississippi burning. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So the students started their History Day research by interviewing the families of the 3 victims who were murdered after they had gone down to try to help people register to vote. The students went through 2,000 pages of FBI transcripts. They then looked at every newspaper article imaginable. I mean, they dug in and did their research. And amazingly, they got an interview, a phone call with Edgar Ray Killen. Edgar Ray Killen at that time was the alleged murderer, but, and many people believe that, but he had never been brought to trial, had never been, certainly not convicted then. But there was an idea that he was the killer, right? So the students, after they dug in and done all this incredible research, they went to their teacher and they said, you know what, there is evidence, there really is evidence. Justice can be served. So the teacher, great history, social studies teacher, of course, what does he say? What are you going to do about it? And so these kids took all their research, copied it, turned it over to the FBI. They lobbied the governor of Mississippi. They testified on the Hill to Congress. And the year after, I think it was 2004, the next year, the trial was reopened, the case was reopened. Edgar Ray Killen was brought to trial and convicted. It's an amazing story about how kids first are not afraid to look at the difficult issues. They dig in to search for the truth and find the evidence to support what they believe that they have found in their interpretations of it, after looking at all the different angles, all the different perspectives, not opinions, but actual perspectives, and allowing the historical players to do the talking. Right? And in doing so, they brought justice. And in doing that, they get that sense that, you know, this has not taught me to be an anti-American against American history, against my country. They looked at that and said, look at what we're able to do here in this country. So when lawmakers are talking about how, oh, we're teaching kids to be anti-American, no, we're not. A real true study of the past teaches kids to want to become involved and believe that you can do that in this country. So I think that the forces right now that are making these changes in these state legislatures have really got it backward. And so I want to tell you a story about another History Day, couple of students, a few students. It's another example of students wanted to try to right some wrongs and become involved and believe that that's what you do here in this country. And that's why they're not anti-American, they're completely in favor of all that America truly stands for. So 1996, the theme was taking a stand in history. And a student, her name is Heather Jurgensen, was a high school student in Uniontown, Kansas. And Heather wanted to look at the Little Rock 9, the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, the integration that took place in 1957. Well, we all know the story, right? And she became very interested in this young woman here. This is that iconic picture, right? We've all seen it in documentaries, we've seen it in textbooks, it's all over the place. When people start talking about the integration of Central High School, this is one of the top pictures that you see. And so this was in Heather's textbook, and she wanted to take a look at this and really understand this young person and what happened to her. So she started digging and trying to find who that was. This young woman's name was Elizabeth Eckford. And Heather found her very quickly. She looked up the phone book in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is sort of pre-internet, you know, so Googling was not part of this whole thing. So she found her in the phone book and called her up, found out that Eckford was only one of the 9 that actually stayed in Little Rock after that episode. And she was somebody who didn't give out a lot of interviews. She suffered from sort of a PTSD from her experience, but she was willing to talk to Heather because It was a young person, a student, genuinely interested and wanted to talk to her. And I've seen this with History Day kids all over the place. You know, they'll call up Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter talks to them. You know, they'll call up, you name it, famous people, politicians, etc. They're all more than willing to talk to kids. Now, if I called them, not so much, right? But they're more than willing to talk to students. And so we always try to encourage kids, just, you know, pick up that phone or send that email, because people want to help you learn. So anyway, she found Eckford, and Eckford invited Heather and some of her friends and her teacher down to Little Rock. And when they got there, she took them on the bus ride that she had taken that morning, that first day of school. She gave them a tour of the high school. And then she sat down for a very emotional interview. And from that interview and her other research, Heather created a documentary. Now, 2 boys went down to Little Rock with Heather and her teacher, and they wanted a different angle. So they said to Eckford, were there any white kids that were nice to you? She said there was one. His name was Kendall Reinhardt, and he said hello to her. And that made a difference. The one student who was nice simply by saying hello, and it made a difference to her. They never saw each other after that year. She had no idea what happened to him, where he was. Well, these 2 boys tracked him down in Kentucky and interviewed him for their group performance on the stand that he took in history during that fateful year. So the kids entered their regional History Day contest. They won and went to their state contest in Kansas and won, and were moving on to the national contest. And when they found out that they were moving on, they invited their respective interviewees to meet them here in College Park and attend the national contest with them. And they did. So they were reunited for the first time in 39 years. And it was, you can imagine, it was very emotional. And especially so for Elizabeth Eckford, because she had truly suffered so much from that episode all her life. She had stayed away from wearing clothes that had the colors black and gold in them, because those were the school colors. And it was too much of a reminder. But every day at the national contest, and there they are at the national contest together, every day she wore black and gold. So it was kind of a cathartic experience for her. And after that, Eckford went on to do presentations and give speeches. So it is this opportunity for kids not only to dig into history, but to also, in this case, not so much bring justice like the Mississippi burning case, but in this case, to help an individual through some difficult stuff and come out better on the other side. They all stayed in contact. The Eckford and Reinhardt attended the kids' graduations. They also attended weddings, and so on. And so it's a really wonderful, one of my favorite stories to tell about National History Day. But again, I think it's a good story about how kids can confront some difficult issues and in the end come out in a very positive way and a very positive understanding of their nation's history, and the fact that individuals can make a difference. And despite some serious tragedies in our nation's past, there are also triumphs of, particularly of individuals and their own determination to triumph from those tragedies. And I know some of you know History Day well, know me well, and you know I'm throwing out and talking with themes, triumph and tragedy, and taking a stand. Sorry, but it's just like my nature. It's the way I live my life with these themes. Okay. Back to sort of teaching with courage. I think this is all part and parcel of teaching history with courage. National History Day is this great opportunity to help teachers who are faced with the difficulties of teaching some of these darker episodes, more controversial issues of our nation's past, and also in going into depth in a topic, because we know that teachers in middle and high schools, they've got their curriculum, they've got to get through the whole scope and sequence thing, and don't have a lot of time to go into depth in a lot of topics. So History Day is an opportunity to have students do just that and dig in and go very much into depth and studying the past, but also researching the past. And it's very effective because, as Sally pointed out in her introduction, kids take ownership of this. They take ownership of their learning. So it becomes very, very personal to them. And I think that helps the teachers help their kids deal with some of these more difficult issues. And really, I think that's what teaching with courage is about, and learning with courage, because not just teaching history or social studies with courage, it's also learning with courage and being willing to open yourselves up to look at some of the more difficult times of our past. So thinking about multiple perspectives and finding the evidence and digging in, this sort of brings me back to argument and evidence that I just want to touch briefly upon. When I think about argumentation and evidence, of course, I'm thinking about what do historians do in seeking the truth. Well, we ask tough questions, we look for the evidence, and then we formulate an argument. And it's very important in doing that we not run right away to the primary sources. We've seen that so many times, kids, we put such an emphasis on that, which is important in doing history, but kids want to run right to the primary sources. But before they do that, they have to have this big warning to them. First, the first warning is you don't go to the evidence. I mean, you go to the evidence to get to your argument, not the other way around. We're not scientists. We don't come up with hypotheses and then try to find the evidence to prove it. We ask the questions, look at the evidence, and then develop our argument. But we can't do that unless we've looked at historical context. People who see me do workshops or know me well, I kind of become famous for saying no context, no contest. You have to do your secondary reading. You have to do your background information and place your topic into context in order to try to understand what that topic is about. So I'll give you another little History Day, story that's one of my favorites when talking about the importance of historical context. So in 2005, the theme was communication and history, which was our theme for our 2021 contest this past year. And a popular topic then, popular topic this past year, Navajo code talkers. Those of you who've been around History Day a long time, you know that pops up over and over and over. That and the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire are the two biggest topics in National History Day. So I was at a regional contest in the state of Washington that year. And after the award ceremony, a teacher came up to me and said, my girls won and we're going on to the state contest. But we've done this several times and we just can't get out of state. We can't figure out how to win to get to national contest. Can you tell us how to win? And of course I said, nope, no. The moon has to be in the right phase. Jupiter has to align with Mars. The karma's got to be good. It takes some luck and all that kind of thing to win. However, I can tell you how to be a little bit more successful, right? And of course, show you this Navajo code talkers. This was one of the pictures on the kids exhibit. So I said, let's go look at this exhibit. So their exhibit had 4 panels. The first one was all about the ancient Navajos. Second one was taking their land, moving them to reservations, oppression, etc. The third panel had this photo and a few others, and then quotes from generals saying that the code talkers did a good job. And then the fourth panel had the more recent awarding of medals 60 years, more than 60 years later. The medals were awarded by President George W. Bush to the surviving code talkers. So that was their exhibit. So let me look at that bibliography. Okay, bibliography, they had tracked down most of the surviving code talkers, those poor code talkers. You know how many kids have tracked them down to do interviews? Just imagine. But they, of course, were kind, and they did the interview. And there were a few articles about the code talkers, a few newspaper articles. There was not a book on World War II. Right? Context, context, context. So I looked at them and I said, all right, you really want me to tell you what you need to do here? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Strip the board, number one. The focus should be on the code talkers and what they did during the war and how it made a difference. You want to tell us why it's significant, not just that it happened and it was a good thing. Those are very basic raw facts. What you want to do is look at a few of, maybe it's battles, maybe it's some type of event episode in which the code talkers played a major role, and as a result, the course of events changed. So you need to do that, and to do that, you've got to read your secondary sources. You've got to look at the context, and get rid of the ancient Navajos. It's not relevant here. Yes, keep some of the information, the history of the Navajos and losing their land from the reservations, that kind of oppression piece, because it ties in. And then keep a little bit of the awarding of the medals more than 60 years later, finally getting their due, right? But the bulk of it, what they did and why it was important. They looked like deer in the headlights. I thought, okay, girls, good luck, and I'll see ya. And I went traveling back to College Park, and then I didn't go to the state contest there and kind of lost track of them. And I, see a lot of kids and a lot of exhibits. So I, really wasn't thinking more about them after I left. But at the national contest that year, I was walking down the hall and I get this tap on my shoulder from behind, turn around. There they are. Remember us, you made it, we did it. And they did. I thought, let's go see that exhibit. And they did this really amazing work. And no, they didn't win at national contest, but that's not the point, right? So that they learned how to be more successful, and they learned to think more like a historian. But they also learned to look at a topic that its antecedents were difficult, but there was also triumph. And so that, I think, again, is another fantastic opportunity that helps young people understand that there's some difficult stuff out there, but there also are so many opportunities for people to overcome and to succeed and find triumph. So those are some of my very favorite National History Day stories. And I'm wanting to be mindful of the time here. And I see that my clock is saying 9:41. And I want to ask if I'm to go to 9:50 or to 10 or 9:55.
9:55 should work. Maybe in a few minutes we could go to questions.
Yeah.
But this has been really great so far, so I'm enthralled.
Well, I think people always ask me for the stories, and I've got this collection, of testimonials, and they come from kids and teachers and parents about the impact that History Day has had on young people. So I thought I'd give you another couple of quick stories. I have some other slides that get into some of the ways in which you formulate an argument with the evidence, but I think these examples help tell that story. So I don't want to drill down too nitty-gritty here when I think I've got some stories that are truly inspiring and that I want to share with you. So one of the best things I think about History Day is that it's not just for honors kids, AP, gifted and talented, whatever you happen to call them in your particular school district. They do well with everything. Nothing wrong with that. But National History Day is a motivator, unlike anything I've ever seen. It gets kids who need that something extra, right? Need the little something extra to get them interested in learning again, interested in history. And History Day does that because it allows them to choose their own topics and conduct their own research and take ownership, and it makes it very personal. And it's done a lot to actually keep kids in school, has prevented potential dropouts from dropping out. It sounds almost corny, but it does indeed work that way, and it becomes so personal, and kids take such ownership that it's theirs, and it then gives them an opportunity to really think about this whole learning thing. And I often then do better overall in school, not just in history or social studies. So there's a young kid, a boy in Florida. His name is David. And David was a difficult student, difficult child. The principal of the school he was in told his mother that he should be moved to a school for kids who really can't learn. Well, his mother didn't believe that, thought there was something there in David, just wasn't. No one had brought it out. So she put David into a different school where they did History Day. And David was in remedial classes for the most part, except for his social studies class. And he raised his hand, volunteered to do History Day. It was an option in that teacher's classroom. And teacher thought, well, okay, all right, this is good. We'll learn something. Well, he did pretty well, pretty darn well. So the next year he did it again. This year he was in more regular classes than remedial classes. He did History Day and he made it to the state contest. Year after that, David was beginning to take honors classes, and he made it to the national contest with his History Day documentary. He went on to, he went to school at University of Florida, I believe, in the Honors College. And then 2 years ago, he graduated from the London School of Economics with a master's degree. And this is the kid that could not learn. And his mother and his teacher say, if it not for History Day, he might never have made it. So that's another one of my very favorite stories of all time. And so I'm thinking that maybe I should stop with that, unless you all want to hear some more, and see if you all have questions or comments. I am not good about reading chats, so while I'm
good.
talking.
The chat has been live with praise for sure. While we're waiting for folks to maybe formulate a question, I was hoping that you might be able to answer a question for me. Mm-hmm. National History Day is clearly a leader across the nation for social studies education. I was hoping that you might be able to tell us a little bit about what are some of the advocacy efforts that your group is involved with in order to promote social studies in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing is that we have been in touch with one of your Congress persons, so Representative DeLauro, and her efforts to try to pass the they've named it, it started out with one name and now it's got another name, and I'm not sure. It's Educating for American Democracy, I think is the new name of it, something like that, that would come with significant funding for his history and civics education. And we've been working with her office on that, which I think is really, really important. History Day was first authorized in the American History and Civics Act of 2004. And so we're hoping that we'll get that reauthorization in the new one that Congressman DeLauro is co-sponsoring. And that's very important. So we're doing our work on the Hill to advocate for more history education. And also, we've put out some statements in this last year. We have, in our history, we've tried to sort of stay out of the political fray for the most part. History Day doesn't teach any particular, curriculum, any particular interpretation or agenda. Our job is to give teachers and kids the tools to use to discover history for themselves. So we've pretty much tried to stay out of that. And back in the 1990s, early 90s, when the history standards wars were going on, we didn't say anything. We just go about what we're doing. But in the last year, we felt that we can't sit still and be quiet any longer. So after the murder of George Floyd, then also in reaction to the former president's 1776 commission, and then right after the January 6th insurrection, we put out statements about the importance of studying the past to understand the issues of the present and how critical historical perspective is to making sense of what's happening now, and then making decisions about the future. And despite the fact that we've seen so many stories of, it's all, bad stuff. Every time you turn on the news, you open up the newspaper, blogs, podcasts, and the whole bit, so much of it is what's wrong, what's not working, et cetera, et cetera. And it's hard, especially now with this attack on history education and on historical truth. But I have to tell you, I have hope. I really do. When I see what these kids do and how open they are and how interested they are in seeing justice be served and in getting involved and making an effort and trying to create change themselves, despite all the bad stuff, I really have hope. I think this generation coming up is really going to be something, and they're going to help turn things around. I just hope that I'll still be around to watch it happen.
Thank you so much for that. I think one of the things that I pulled from your statement, the answer to the question I asked you, is this idea that there's an attack on historical truth. And, whereas in the past you were saying, well, we're going to stay out of the political fray, but it almost seems like, how do you turn and run from saying, oh, we're not going to be, truth is becoming politicized. So it's an interesting situation where, especially as a nonprofit, right? So you only can do so much lobbying, so to speak. But then when the very essence of truth, in fact, is being questioned, how do you stand by? I just think that's such an interesting position that we're in.
It is. We can't stand by any longer. That we just can't, and be true to ourselves and be true to our values. It's just not possible any longer. But we do it carefully, because we're not, we're try to be as nonpartisan as we possibly can be, and so do this very carefully. And the truth is, as a nonprofit, and for me as a fundraiser, I do have to be very careful about my choice of words and how far we go, because of certain donors who happen to be on on the more conservative side. But I have always said, when it comes to fundraising, I will never sell the soul of National History Day. I've had to rent it on occasion, but I will never sell the soul.
Oh my goodness, thank you for that. Well, we only have just a few minutes left, because I do want to give folks a 5-minute break before we start with our next speaker. But I was hoping that you might be able to just speak briefly about what has it been like to develop a coalition of leaders to kind of promote what you're saying here, which is fact and evidence-based history. What has that been like for you? Maybe what are some of the efforts that you've engaged with to make that happen?
Well, there's a new coalition, actually. It's called Learn from History, learnfromhistory.org. And you can go to that website, and it's a coalition of organizations, National History Day, of course, but NCSS, American Historical Association, Organization of American Historians, various iCivics, various civics and history organizations, nonprofits for the most part, who are very concerned about what's going on. And so this coalition is formed with a very small staff to monitor what's happening in the states and in these legislatures, and putting out alerts, and also creating information materials that can be used by individuals to contact their own Congress people or state legislatures to try to reverse some of the bad things that are going on right now. And that's a really good one that just really just was created, I guess, last 6 months or so, something like that. But they're very good, and they put out a survey recently, and we passed it on. If you haven't seen it, I'll send it out again. But it's a survey where they're trying to find out what's happening in local areas, and we're going to get the results of that pretty soon.
All right, so we are going to close up for this part of the session. I was just hoping maybe if you have any last final words or anything before we close, before we say goodbye. Dr. Gorn, do you have anything last final words for us?
Just first of all, we love teachers, history educators. Everyone is doing such a important job and doing it with courage. We see that every day. And our teachers are facing so much, and we're so proud of them, especially in the last year when we all had to go virtual, and they pivoted like that with us and made it happen for their kids. And, you know, it's so obvious that the kids are most important, and thank you for all that you do. And so I'll just end with how I end every History Day and just say, Happy History Day, everybody.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gorn, for your inspiring words about the importance of fact and evidence in the context. You know, it's not just about the primary sources, but it's also about the context, right? No context, no contest. I like that, actually. Years ago,
you gotta footnote me now.
Oh no, just trust me. Every time I say that, I'm going to say, Dr. Gorn says. But anyway, for everyone that's here, we are going to take about a 5-minute break. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Cathy Gorn for her presentation. We will start promptly at 10 o'clock with Mike Williams from the National Humanities Center, which we are very much looking forward to. So why don't we take a break for now? And again, we'll start again promptly at 10 a.m. Thank you again, Dr. Gorn.